Today we'll be going over how to use the new video player in Unity, which replaces the movie textures we were using previously. The video player is a much better component, and as you'll see here today, it's very easy to use. Let's get started. Today we're doing a little bit of a different video addressing a question that several people have been posing for a little while now and does need addressing. It's about the new video player in Unity. As of one of the newer versions, or the latest versions of Unity, movie texture is obsolete and no longer even supported in the latest ones. So that's instead been replaced by the video player, which does a fantastic job, much better than movie texture ever did, in my opinion, a lot faster. So you can see that we have a picture here, but if we use the video player, then we can bring in a video just like this, and see how smooth that is, even maximizing. They really did a good job optimizing the video player as opposed to the movie texture, so it is something much better to use. Now, the video player is a component. The movie texture was just an asset, but we have a component for the video player now. So if I just come down, let's just show you how this works. I'm just going to make a raw image. Where are you, raw image? There you are. And scale this bad boy up to size. Set those anchors up. And then if we go to add component, there is this little thing called a video player. You don't have to add this. This is just so I can show you what we're talking about. But here is the video player. Actually do add this because we're going to write a little script here to control some things. So you can see all the different parameters here. First of all, we have our source, and this is where the video is going to be playing from. We have two options, video clip and URL. A video clip is the asset that has replaced a movie texture. That's what we'll be importing into our project. Super fast to bring those in. It's really incredible. So much faster than having to import movie textures. It's like instant. Really good. URL is for if you want to browse to a particular file on either the web or somewhere on your personal computer. And I believe you could put in an IP there. But yeah, so what we're going to be doing is a video clip, and of course that's where the video clip will go. So if I just come and select a little fantasy landscape there, and play on awake, obviously, same as an audio source, that just means it's going to play when it first launches. Wait for first frame is a little different. This is for when a video is loading. It won't try to play until it's ready, at least that's my understanding of that. Loop. For these purposes, most of what we're going to be doing will require a loop, so you just tick that on. Skip on drop is if we have a certain amount of lag and there's a freeze in the game. This will allow the video to catch up to where it's supposed to be by skipping the frames to get where it needs to be on the actual timeline. Playback speed, you just speed it up, slow it down. You can't go negative though. I haven't tried doing negative from script, but I won't say that it doesn't work, but I don't think it does. Okay, and render mode. We want to make sure that this is setting the availability of target texture. If we just switch that to screen space, then we can specify a camera where it's going to be displaying in the viewport of the camera. But for world space, I'm going to be using that because I want to assign it to a render texture. So I have a little render texture right here. Fit horizontally, the aspect ratio, this is just going to be so once the resolution of the window scales up, the video can either stretch or not stretch depending on what you want. Fit horizontally is a good setting in my opinion to keep the best aspect ratio. And then of course if your video has audio to it, you can control the volume and you can mute it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play here with this video component attached. And you'll notice I just have a big white screen because my raw texture is not using the render texture that this video player is using. I just put that in there. And so another thing is, with your videos, you want to make sure that your render texture is set to the resolution of the video. So let me just come to my video here. Fantasy landscape. How big is this file? I don't see it on here. Let me just go show in Explorer, fantasy landscape, properties, details. Okay, so this is 1280 by 720. So that's how big I want the render texture to be for this file. Let me just compare to this one. Same thing. Some videos may have different aspect ratios, which is why when we go to create our render texture by script, we'll pull those dimensions from the video itself. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I am going to just do that manually here. So the size, the width is 1280 by 720. And let's not forget to add that render texture to the raw image. There we go. So we can see that it's moving. It's very smooth. Very good performance. So that is how the video player works. Now, how we use it inside of script is a little different. So let me go ahead and just remove this component. And I'm going to make a little script in here. Let's come to my testing folder. This is just where I store everything that I'm going to delete later on. And test video. Get to my raw image. Just put that on there. And then we'll open it up in Visual Studio or whatever scripting application you have. So first things first, when you're doing anything with the video components, you want to make sure that you include the video namespace because that's where it's all stored. And that's just in unityengine.video. And with that, we'll have access to everything we need. So in this start function, I'm going to say that video player video equals a new instance. I'm going to attach this to this object. So GameObject.addComponent video player. So that gives me my video player. And for the clip that I'm going to use, I'm going to make this a public variable. So public video clip, that's what's replaced the movie texture. Video clip. And then I'm going to say video.source equals video source dot video clip, so that way we use a clip. I believe it defaults to that, so that line may be unnecessary, but I like to put it in there for safe measure. Video dot clip equals clip. So that assigns our video player the clip to use, and that on its own will cause it to automatically play as long as play on awake is true, and by default it is. One thing that is not true by default is loop. So video.loop, and it's actually called isLooping. Just going to make sure I set that to true, because that's the type of video I'm using, something that's going to loop over and over again. Now here's where we actually get it to display on the screen. We need to create a render texture to assign to our image. And we can do that by saying render texture, text equals new render texture. And the way we're going to be creating this is we're going to want the width, the height, and the depth of the texture. And by depth, I mean the Z buffer, which that's used for cases like ambient occlusion, where you need the depth of the scene. But for something like a video that's just being displayed on the UI, we don't need depth to it. So we can have that value, the lowest, which is 0, no depth. And we're going to get this by referencing our clip. So clip.width, but you'll notice that this value actually here is a uint. It's not a regular integer. And that's not going to work with render texture because it's expecting a plain old integer value. So we can just use mathf.round to int or some other conversion method. And that'll give us the value that we want for width. We'll do the same thing for height. mathf.round to int clip.height. And since I'm not using depth, I'm going to put that as 0. If we hover, you can see those values there, the width, the height, and the depth, and that's going to create the render texture with the exact resolution of our video. So then I'm going to say that the video dot texture, it's going to be the target texture because that's where it's rendering to, target texture equals text. So now with that line, our video player is going to be producing this video and displaying it in this render texture. And we still need to put it on the UI, so we'll want a reference to a raw image there. Public raw image, which means, of course, you know, using the Unity, I did not just say that, Unity engine.ui. Raw image. I'll just call it the renderer. And I'm going to say renderer.texture equals text. And if we come into Unity and populate those fields right there, and choose my fantasy landscape, once we hit play, you'll notice that immediately our video starts playing. We have our looping video. We even have the sound that goes along with it because that's automatic. Now, if we were to use that mute option, then we can mute it. We can change the volume of it there. So those are all good controls that we have. Now, if we don't want to use audio, then all we have to do is call this video.setDirectAudioMute. And this has a track index. So this function takes a track index and a Boolean value as to whether we want to mute it or not. So if the video has multiple track indexes configured into it, then you would have your choice of which one you want to affect. But for most of them, we're only going to have one, and we can say 0. And bool mute, we can just put that as true. And by doing that, when we start, our audio is automatically muted. So that's how we bring video players into Unity and into our games. In the previous videos, there was this script called a BCFC, a background cinematic foreground controller. I have since redone that script and just called it the LayerController. It still functions the same way, it has the layers, the background cinematic and foreground. And inside each layer we have a current graphic, something that's actively displaying, and then old ones that are fading out and will be deleted once they hit 0. There are a few changes to it, so I will post this in the description in case anyone wants to download it. But if you do use this in the place of your BCFC, then you're going to have to replace all the references as well. So when I try to set anything on this on one of these layers, I have two functions, set texture and set video. Now video will take one of those video clips and then it attempts to create a graphic from that clip. So when I come into my graphic class, you can see that we have isVideo and public video player. These are stored inside here. So whenever one of these objects is created, we go through that same process of creating a render texture and making the video as a new component, adding the source, the clip, the render mode, and looping, and then just set the volume, and then we have a video on the UI. Basically, it's exactly the same thing as we just did, only it's integrated into another script. So to show you how this works in action, I'll take you through these functions, so that way you're not wondering what in the world I might be talking about. So as I was showing up here, this is where we first start out. So I'll say either set texture on one of these graphics layers, and to say what that is, the layer is just the background cinematic foreground. It's one of these panels. And these panels are going to have a graphic object, which is just a raw image, and a canvas group, which I use to control the alpha. So that's what those two are. So I set the transition speed of the layer to a transition speed that I apply in that function, so that way I can control how fast and how slow they fade in, and then say create the graphic based off of that texture or based off of this video clip. So when I come down here, say create graphic with that video clip, we're going to check first that if the current graphic on this layer, if it's not null, and if the name matches the name of the clip, which means if it's playing this clip, then I'm just going to return because it's already the current graphic and I don't need to make another one. Otherwise, if it's not, then I look at the old graphics, the ones that haven't been deleted yet, and go through each one and see if their name matches the clip. And here's that function right here for checking the name. Just saying it's literally one line. Return if the object's name equals this format graphic and then the texture name or the clip name. So I'm checking to see if that name matches what I'm trying to apply. So if it does match, and if the current graphic is not null, and it's not in the old graphics list, then I'm going to add it to the old graphics, so that way what's currently up there is going to fade out, and then this new one that's being created will come in. I'm sorry, not the new one that's created, the one from the old list, because it's still active, and I'll just be reusing it by setting it as the current one again. So then I'll enable it, and that's that. If those are not true, if it's neither the current and it was never in one of these old graphics, then I have to create a new one. We'll say a new graphic equals a new graphic object with this clip. And when we create it using a new clip, I just define what layer the graphic is going to be on. I instantiate a new graphic or a new raw image, and then make sure I make it true, so that way I can fetch the canvas group for taking care of the alpha and the renderer for applying the image, and then set the parent to the layer that it belongs to. Then I create that render texture that we were doing earlier using the width of the clip and the height of the clip and no depth, and apply that to the render texture. Then the video is created and added to that object. The source is set to video clip. The clip is applied to what I'm trying to use. The render mode is set to render texture. And the video target texture is set to the texture we just created. Make sure it's looping. I set the audio to 0 so that way it's muted. And if I specify whether to use the audio or not, if I don't want to use the audio, then I'm going to mute it instead of just having it at 0. So that way, even when functions later down the line change the volume, it'll still be muted and it won't be affected. Then I just name it appropriately. So back up here, after that graphic is created, right here, I check and see if the current graphic is not null. If it's not, and it's not in the old graphics, I move it to the old graphics so that way it can disable and transition out, and then set the current graphic to the new one that was just created, and say that this is now being set to the current renderer, which I don't need. Hope that all makes sense. As I said, this will also be in the description for anyone who wants to download it. So once you either use this or you make your own function to do the same thing, and once you're ready to use the video clips, have them transition on the UI, then we can go into our dialog actions and make this a command we can run from our chapter file. Inside the dialog actions, down here I have made a little function called setLayerImage, which just does a picture. So I'm going to do one for a video. For set layer video. Command set layer video data 1. And then I'm going to want that down here, set layer image. Basically the same function. Alright, so here we are. In this command, I'm splitting it like we always do for these, and then I'm getting the layer, defaulting it to the background, and then depending on what my first parameter is, what letter it starts with will determine what layer I'm trying to use. So it can either be the background, or if it starts with a C, it'll be the cinematic. If it starts with F, then it'll be the foreground layer. That gets my layer, and then the parameter, I'm just running a test to see if the parameter name of the texture or the video that I'm trying to go to is not blank. If it's blank, or if it says null, or if it says none, then I'm going to clear the layer, which disables everything on it and transitions everything out. If that's not it, then I have a name and I need to try to find the video from it. So instead of using a texture like I did for the image, I'm going to use a video clip, but I need to incorporate the namespace using Unity engine.video. Then down at the bottom here, say video clip, gonna say clip equals resources.load texture 2D, and the path that I have mine stored at is images, graphics, and videos plus parameters 1. And this will be loaded as a video clip. Another way you could do this is if you were using asset bundles, which is probably a better way to do it, honestly, but I'm using resources right now and it's perfectly performant for everything that I'm trying to do, so I don't have any need to change that at the moment. If I go for something bigger, then yeah, I want to use an asset bundle, but this is perfectly fine right now. And it should be fine for you as well, as long as we're doing visual novels which aren't too heavy in anything that they need. So if the clip is not null, that means we were able to pull the video. Otherwise, I just log a warning saying that the video, images, graphics, videos, followed by the name was not found. Please check the path. Give a nice little reminder to myself. And if I'm passing in a third parameter, then I parse it to get the transition speed. And this is where I'll call that function that we were looking at earlier, set video to this clip with this transition speed. So that is called set layer image or set layer video. Inside this test dialog chapter file, I'm going to change this to set layer video. So I'm calling that command that we were just making, and the layer that I want to use is going to be the background layer. I want to find a texture, the one that I was showing earlier, which is in the test. What folder was that in? Let me just see what that was in. Sorry about my throat here. Images, graphics, videos, test videos. Yes. Okay. So it was test videos and then fantasy landscape. And the transition speed, I'll want to make that 0.5. I'm going to save that, come into Unity, and just go ahead and get rid of this raw image because I don't need that testing anymore. And then launch it. Let's see what happens. Alright, so I go, and as soon as I hit to launch the chapter file, there we go. It loads up the background video, starts playing it. Now, there is a little thing here that if you listen, actually let me start it over so that way it won't have that texture to begin with. I'm going to also change this to 0.1 so you can listen to what I'm going to try to show you, which is just the volume transition. So once I hit it, you hear that? How it took that volume time to build up as the video faded in. That's just a feature I wanted to add. So how I was doing that, let's go back to the LayerController and down, down, down into set visibility. So when I'm changing the alpha of these raw images or these canvas groups, I check if it's a video, which just means if it has a video player on it. If it does, then I'm using video.setDirectAudioVolume, choosing the first track, and then setting it equal to the alpha of the image, so that way the volume fades up and falls down as the image comes in and out of the scene. So that's some good stuff, but I want to add one more thing to that function. I also want to add a Boolean for using audio or not. So I want to do Boolean use audio equals, this will be if I have parameters dot length equals 4, and since I'm adding a new one, I also want to check that if this is greater than or equal to 3 for my transition speed. If it is, then I'm going to say bool.parse parameters 3, otherwise default to true. Then set video clip speed and use audio, which is not set up yet. LayerController, as soon as I come to my graphic layer up here, set video, I need the Boolean use audio, create graphic with a video clip, which will also take a use audio variable, a Boolean. Take that, and I'll just have that default to true as well. So then where's my create graphic for the video? Right here. Along with the video clip, I want to use audio. Let's just take a look at that. Yep, clip audio. And there, we're good with that. So once I create a new graphic object, I'll have the layer, the clip, and then use audio, which is set up already. It was defaulting to true. So with that there, I can come back in here, and with my 0.1 transition speed, I will say false. I'll change that to 1 so it's not so slow. Come inside Unity, launch it, enter that, and it starts off with no audio. So I can choose whether to use audio or not with my clips. That's how you can integrate it into your chapter files. Let's do one more thing here so that way we can transition between videos. I'm going to come to the end, and this time instead of fantasy landscape, I'll say fantasy city, because that's a different one. And here I will say set layer video to the background to nothing. And I can make that whatever I want, BG background, as long as it starts with a B, because background, cinematic, and foreground all have a different unique starting letter. So that's how I set that one up. I'll say that. Wait for 1 second. And then close out the dialog system. So now let's launch Unity and check that out. There we are. Start it up. There's our video. And then transition to a new video. And then close out. But that clearing didn't work because I had quotation marks there. I'm not supposed to have quotation marks. I can either have nothing, I can have null, or I can have none. Do that again. There you go, fade out, and then close. That is using video players. So I hope all of that was clear. I hope everyone's able to get that. If not, feel free to ask questions down in the comments. I will do my best to answer all of you guys in a timely manner. And the next video is going to be about controlling audio from our pause menu. So that way we can save different settings for our sound effects, our music, whatever volume settings you want to control, and it'll all be accessible. So stay tuned and have a great day, you guys.